will be as
What is going on, guys? It is the SMT. Thank you for taking the time to tune into today's video. What I'm doing with today's video is kind of sort of like a podcast. It's not going to be live or anything. I usually do like to live stream my podcast, but this one's going to be a little bit different. So I've been really busy at work. There's a lot of things going on in my personal life, obviously. Those things don't stop. Family stuff, school, all that. So what I've got to do with this edition of the video is I've got several items to get to coming out of one specific carrier. Of course, you always want to tune in, regardless of who your carrier is. You want to know what's going on in the wireless world. They obviously, impact one another. We see trends in wireless and what's happening. So I wanted to do this podcast. And if you guys like this type of format, I'm doing this one on Verizon, but I could do one for AT&T. I could do one for T-Mobile and Sprint, kind of like on a weekly basis, where I cover a collection of items that come from the carrier, whether it's from their wireless connectivity and network technologies or different hardware that's being announced. So if you guys like this format, it's basically what I normally do with podcasts, but it's not live, and you can watch it on the replay at your own leisure and whatever else. And of course, the comment sections are definitely available for you to sound off, share your thoughts and opinions on the topics, and we can kind of do this on a weekly basis for all carriers. You guys let me know what you think of that format and layout, and maybe it's something we could take advantage of. All right, so do pardon the road noise. I am doing this on the way to work. There's no other way I could find the time to do this, so this is kind of how it's going to be. But I think it's a good opportunity for me to do it with you guys. So anyways, before I get into today's content, I want to give a couple of shout-outs. One shout-out to the newest patron, Carlos. Thank you for joining the community, and welcome to you, sir. We're glad to have you, and it's good to have you on as a member. And thank you for supporting SMT Productions. And if you guys want to get involved with the Patreon, want to support production here on the channel, by all means, do check out the link in the description box below. There's also a link to the Discord gang. If you guys want to take a look at that community, there's a link down below as well. And if you want to, make a smaller occasional monetary donation to help support the channel, there is a PayPal share link down in the description box as well. There's other stuff. There's my Twitter handle, and there's also one more link. Save yourself some money on the Visible service. You've got my referral code down there. So let's go ahead and get into the content of today's video. This is on Verizon. So Verizon's doing a lot. A lot of people don't think like, okay, well, I don't have Verizon. It's not my carrier of choice. I shouldn't really care. But in actuality, you should, because Verizon is often viewed as, one of the most successful carriers of the day. Their network technology is top notch. They actually, in my opinion, do the most with the least amount of spectrum. So on a, per megahertz, I guess, concentration of spectrum, they squeeze the most out of their network. They have tons and tons of users, 150 million subscribers probably, and they have very similar spectrum concentrations to T-Mobile, and they just find a way to make it work. Whether it's through densifying small cells and macro sites, they do a really good job of managing. I know they do a lot of network managing from a per user basis, but anyways, to get into the concept of today's video, the first story I want to talk about is what they're doing with DSS. So Verizon is currently at MWC. They're talking a lot about what they're doing with network technology and how they're moving forward in the future with 5G. So T-Mobile actually announced this as well. Now here's Verizon giving insight on what they're doing with their core, as well as other things in the network. So what Verizon is doing is they're going to partake in this whole dynamic spectrum sharing technology. So what it is essentially is you've got 4G LTE and then you've got 5G. Most people view it as separate, but when you do the DSS approach, you actually kind of start to integrate the two. So what this allows to do is it allows you to kind of like streamline the user experience on the network. What it does is you've got 4G LTE connectivity, you've got 5G, and instead of keeping them separate, what it allows is for a very seamless, easy, and streamlined interaction between the two. So if you go back and forth, depending on your signal, depending on what's available in your area, it allows for seamless transitions between the two technologies. And then for somebody who has a device that's 5G enabled, they can seamlessly switch between the two, taking advantage of whichever signal they have. So I'm looking at the announcement from the MWC piece, and they're talking about the 5G NR core, and they're talking about the LTE network handoff and how that's going to work. That's one of the issues Verizon currently has right now, is going between LTE and 5G. And because it's not really NR, it's more of a solution that's kind of isolated in certain locations. I almost feel like Verizon's 5G approach has become almost like a Wi-Fi hotspot. So you're in these NBA arenas, you're in these NFL stadiums, and the range in which the millimeter wave connects is very limited. And then the application and how the network connects is, I don't know, it's kind of clunky in a way, and it's not staying connected, and it's having a hard time getting connected. So what they did in this announcement, they're kind of explaining there's a lot of room for improvement. Verizon's working on it, and I think this is an indication. Whenever Verizon talks about these things, they're usually close to, major deployment, or, kind of reaching the point where they have kind of mainstreamed their connectivity. And, T-Mobile likes to get out in front, and they do a lot with PR, right? Whenever they improve the network, they like to announce it and that sort of thing. Verizon's more like, hey, we announce stuff when it's ready, when it's showtime, and they do it very cryptically and under this, behind the closed doors, and then they just do it, and then we find out, and then we kind of cover it. So, Verizon will be utilizing DSS, dynamic spectrum sharing. I think it's important. They've got 3 different manufacturers involved on the hardware side. I remember them talking about Ericsson. I know Samsung's involved with this 5G technology, and I think Nokia possibly. I forget. There are 3 really important manufacturers in this. Ericsson's the big one. Huawei would be involved, but you got like the trade war going on and the situation with politics here with the U.S. and the current administration. So there's kind of barriers there to get Huawei involved. We're not going to be seeing that anytime soon. So those are kind of the restricted 3 wholesalers and hardware manufacturers for the technologies. So the 5G technology from Verizon needs improvement. I think help is on the way. You look at a situation with the DSS capabilities and how carriers plan to leverage that technology. It's going to integrate LTE and 5G very seamlessly, and that's actually what we need. I don't think 5G is just restricted on spectrum. I think it's also restricted in how well it stays connected and gets connected and interacts with LTE. So I think that problem is being addressed here, and don't ever sleep on Verizon. Verizon always finds a way. I know they've got spectrum constraints and they've got to aggressively manage the network, but this could really be one of the things that Verizon needs to really solidify its 5G, because we know that they know what they're doing when it comes to the networks. That's Verizon's calling card. LTE availability, having fast connectivity, very usable speeds, reliable, LTE all over the nation, very few dead spots, true national coverage. You could say what you want about their business practices and their pricing, whatever, but it's hard to argue, when it comes to network, very few do it like them. All right, so that's that story. The second story from last year, so stemming from 2018 and now 2019, Verizon was one of the first companies, and they love to do this, to deploy 5G. That's what they like to do. They like to be the first. It becomes like a trophy on the mantle. So what they started doing was they started rolling out 5G, residential and mobile. So the mobile piece we're pretty familiar with. One thing that hasn't got a lot of run on the channel is the home 5G piece. So they launched it in a few markets. I think it was 4. I know Sacramento, LA. It's been so long since I've updated on this, but now we actually have one. So 5G home from Verizon could be an option for you. Really depends on your market. The slowdown with that particular product has been the fact that Verizon realized what they did was going to fail. They were going completely proprietary. So what that means is Verizon was coming up with their own standard, their own solution to offering 5G home internet. There's a couple of problems with that. Number one, when it's specific to what Verizon's doing and no other standards are involved, it makes upgrading more challenging. It makes it very specific to the carrier, and it's hard to integrate hardware in that way. And the second thing is just trying to streamline it so that you can troubleshoot things on the fly. Well, when things are standardized, it makes that a lot easier. So Verizon, I think, realized this, and I think they backtracked a little bit and they really slowed down deployment. They stopped really pushing the technology. So we saw that, and I think Verizon realized their flaw, and they kind of changed that dynamic. And I can't fault them for that. I'm actually in support of it. I think the fact that they responded to it was good, and they finally did it, and I'm glad that they did, because now with them moving towards a more standardized approach, they should be able to be more responsive and produce a better product for home 5G. Now, some people may not think that home 5G is an option for them, but let me tell you this. Home internet providers, broadband in general, they leave a lot to be desired. Whether it's equipment, whether it's service, whether it's pricing. There are a lot of reasons. Customer care. Home 5G from Verizon could be an option for some. Not an option for all. I guess some people get gigabit speeds, and there's nothing better than fiber. But home internet companies are not laying out fiber across the U.S. It's too expensive. This could be an option for you. And this is why I update these types of announcements. So Verizon is tweaking their 5G home approach. They're going to be going completely standards-based, and they're putting a lot of new technology into this particular product. And there's an article that I read through, and I looked at it, and it's very promising. I think their Chicago launch, I think they're relaunching in Sacramento. I think also the LA market is going to be seeing a lot of free upgrades. Customers that currently have Verizon Home 5G are going to be receiving new hardware. That's that standardized hardware piece. Verizon made a huge mistake in going proprietary. They realized that they've backtracked, and they're going to be sending out upgraded hardware that is completely standardized, and that's going to help consumers, and that's going to make Verizon more responsive to making the experience with the Home 5G, enhanced, better, and it just wasn't going to work on a proprietary level, at least not in the long term. They knew it was a short-term thing. They insist on always being first to things, even when things are not necessarily ready. So that's kind of the issue there, and that's what they've been dealing with since October of last year. I want to say it was 2018. Markets like Houston, Indianapolis, LA, Sacramento, they were getting these services, and customers were not, really able to take advantage of what true 5G represents. And that's because the technology wasn't necessarily ready. So, when you think about the cost, Verizon customers, if you have their wireless, you'll be paying $50 a month for the service. It's attractive, especially if Verizon can offer something like gigabit speed. Even if it's something like 500 megabits per second or 800, that is very, very competitive. So the pricing is there, the speed capabilities is there. I think what we have to wait and see is performance and how this network technology performs. Throw in the standardized hardware and upgrades as they kind of come and go. We'll wait and see what happens, but $50 for Verizon customers monthly, $70 if you're not a Verizon wireless customer. I really feel like if you are a Verizon wireless customer and the service is in your area, it becomes a legitimate option for you. And I think it's going to intrigue a lot of people. If the performance is there, as long as the pricing is up to snuff, it could be something that people want to take advantage of. And story number 3, Verizon is currently on Corning campuses and sites. For those of you that are familiar with Corning Gorilla Glass, it's usually the glass display, technology that a lot of manufacturers are using. So Samsung, as well as other big name companies, I'm sure Lenovo, Motorola, LG, they all use some form of Corning Gorilla Glass. Anyways, Verizon is on their premises, and they are upgrading their specific locations with 5G. I want to circle back to what I spoke to a little bit earlier. Verizon is treating 5G like hotspots. They're treating them like these 5G islands. And I think that's going to be their Achilles heel for a long, long time. So what they're doing is they're attaching 5G nodes and 5G hardware to many different locations across the US. But again, creating these 5G islands, not doing it on a mass scale and looking to deploy on a nationwide level. They're really doing this case to case, location to location. I kind of resent the fact that Verizon is doing it this way and then saying they have 5G markets. They really can't call them 5G markets. They have to call them 5G locations, right? Locations that are very isolated, and they're strategically placed in places where they're either trying to show off and display 5G, or they're trying to alleviate congestion and offload some of the traffic on their LTE network. The problem is the hardware's not there. People don't have 5G enabled devices. So unless Verizon can somehow find a way to push and promote 5G hardware into the hands of users, customers are still going to be taxing the LTE network considerably. So Verizon's trying to kind of it seems, offload onto 5G, pull away from the LTE, but people don't have the devices to really make this happen. So there are many flaws to Verizon's 5G approach. That's obviously one of them. And until they really mainstream the devices, until they completely integrate the network with DSS, And until they really grand scale deploy the 5G in a lot of locations with a lot of nodes and a lot of access points, it'll continue to be this 5G island effect. It almost literally feels like 5G hotspots. So, here's Corning getting access. We've got the NFL stadiums, 30 plus stadiums with it. NBA arenas are starting to get it. There's access areas all over the US, but they are so restricted in their footprint. So, that's kind of like my take on what Verizon's doing. I'd like to hear your thoughts and opinions on what you guys think of Verizon's approach. They are doing a lot. They're very busy. Their technology is fine. They're kind of advancing with the times as things improve and standardized Verizon responds. They're dumping tons of money. I mean, nobody spends like Verizon, except you could say maybe AT&T. But even AT&T, I feel, has a better roadmap on what they're doing with 5G on a national scale, right? So Verizon, that's kind of their situation. You guys drop me a line or two in the comments section below. Maybe address the 3 announcements coming from Verizon. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions, so go ahead and let your voice be heard down in the comments section below. And again, if you kind of like this format, something you could replay, pause, and come back to, and drop the comments as you kind of go along. You guys let me know. I can always do one of these weekly for Verizon. I could also do one of these for T-Mobile and Sprint and AT&T as well. So let me know what you guys think of the format. Let me know what you guys think of what's going on with Verizon. And, we'll get that conversation going in the comment section below. Again, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch and listen. And please make sure that you do like this video. Rate it, help it get into the YouTube algorithms there. If you haven't done so yet, do what you got to do to come back to the SMT. Hit that subscribe button. Go ahead and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload from the SMT. Again, I want to thank you guys for being here. Big shout out to the SMT Nation. And I hope you guys have a great rest of the day. I'm the SMT, and I will see you guys on the next one.